Hi, I'm Jennifer. I've got a new story for you today. It has protective energy, messy relatives, and the moment where someone finally stops keeping the peace. Let's dive in.
My 14-year-old daughter spent 3 days making a birthday cake for my sister-in-law. The frosting said, "Favorite aunt." My mother-in-law dumped it into the trash and said, "No one is going to eat it, sweetie." Then my husband got up and announced this. The whole room froze. By Saturday afternoon, our kitchen looked like a small bakery after a rush. Chloe had spent 3 days on that cake, baking layers after school, testing frosting on parchment, and checking the timer like it mattered more than homework. She wanted vanilla bean cake with strawberry filling because Madison had once called those flavors expensive. While I washed bowls, Chloe bent over the top layer with her piping bag and whispered, "Don't breathe on me, Mom." I stepped back and watched her write "favorite aunt" in careful pink letters, one hand shaking, the other steadying the turntable. "Should I add stars?" she asked. "If you want it to look loved, yes," I said. She smiled, added tiny piped stars, boxed the cake, and tucked extra candles into her purse. On the drive to my mother-in-law Karen's house, Chloe kept glancing at the cake carrier in the back seat. "Aunt Madison is going to lose her mind," Chloe said. "In a good way." I told her to carry it level and let Madison see it before anyone cut it. Chloe nodded so seriously it almost made me laugh. She really believed effort still meant something to every person in that family. Karen's house was already loud when we got there, full of perfume, charcuterie, and people talking over each other in the way my husband Matt's family calls celebration. Matt had raised Chloe since she was 3, so his younger sister had always been Aunt Madison to her. Madison stood by the dining room arch in a tight white dress, taking pictures with 2 friends from her acting conservatory while Karen adjusted the blinds for better light. Chloe asked if she could keep the cake in the spare fridge until dessert, and Karen said, "As long as it doesn't take up too much room." We waited through dinner and through Madison opening glossy gift bags while saying, "Oh my God, stop," without ever sounding like she meant it. When Karen announced dessert, Chloe straightened so fast her fork hit the plate. She went to the spare fridge, lifted out the cake box, set the lid aside, and carried the cake out with both hands, slow and careful, and the whole room turned toward her. Even my father-in-law Robert stopped talking. The frosting was smooth, the strawberries around the base were still bright, and the pink lettering sat right in the center. "Favorite aunt." Chloe looked proud and nervous at the same time. "I made it for you," she said to Madison. "From scratch." For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then Madison tilted her head, looked at the writing, and let out a short laugh that did not belong in that room. At first I thought Madison was just surprised. Then she covered her mouth and said, "Wait, this is serious?" One of her friends looked down at her plate. Madison stepped closer to the cake without touching it, her face tightening like Chloe had handed her something embarrassing. "Favorite aunt?" she said. "That's intense." Chloe blinked. "You said you liked this kind," she answered. Madison let out another laugh, sharper this time. "Yeah, in pictures. I have callbacks next week. I'm not eating sugar, and I definitely can't post a cake that says that." Karen made a quiet sound of agreement. Chloe still stood there holding the board. "You don't have to post it," she said. "I just made it because it's your birthday." Madison glanced at her friends and shrugged. "It kind of looks like a kid cake, Chloe. And favorite aunt makes it sound like I'm 40. A couple people smiled the way adults do when they want to laugh without owning it. Chloe's face went red fast enough that I could see the color move. She looked from Madison to me like she had missed an instruction somewhere. Then Karen pushed back her chair. Karen crossed the room with that brisk, practical energy she uses when she wants cruelty to pass as common sense. She slid one hand under the cake board and said, Let me help before this gets messier than it already is. Chloe didn't let go right away. Karen lowered her voice into that sugar-sweet tone she saves for public corrections. Honey, nobody here is going to eat this, sweetie. Madison has to be careful, and most of us are trying not to poison ourselves with frosting. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. She worked 3 days on that, I said, finally getting out of my chair. Karen gave me a look like I was the one making a scene. And that was very poor judgment, she replied. Then, in front of the whole table, she lifted the cake, walked it to the kitchen trash, tipped the board, and let the whole thing slide into the can. Strawberries, layers, pink letters, all of it. Chloe made one small sound and covered her face. Madison looked away. Robert muttered, "Let's not blow this out of proportion." And one of Matt's aunts said, "Teen girls are sensitive about food." I stood there with my body hot and useless. Chloe started crying in the middle of the dining room, and half the family acted like the embarrassing part was the crying. Madison sat back down first. "Can we please not ruin my birthday over cake?" she said, reaching for her glass like the problem had simply appeared on its own. Karen came back from the kitchen wiping frosting off her fingers. "Exactly," she said. "We had fruit and macarons for a reason." Chloe turned toward the hallway, still crying, and I followed her, but before we made it out, Karen called after us, "She needs to learn not everything she makes is appropriate for every event." That stopped me cold. I turned and saw the table clearly for the first time. Relatives studying their plates, Madison staring at her phone, Robert annoyed that dinner had become inconvenient, and Matt sitting very still at the far end with his napkin folded beside his hand. He wasn't angry in the loud way. He looked precise. Chloe whispered, "I'm sorry." And that was the sentence that finally snapped something in me. "You are not apologizing for being kind," I told her. Across the room, Matt pushed his chair back with a scrape that cut through every other sound in the house. Karen opened her mouth, probably to manage him the way she managed everyone else. She was too late. I knew that look on my husband's face. Matt stood up slowly enough that everyone watched him before he said a word. He picked up his water glass like he was making a toast, then looked directly at Madison. "I wish you every success in acting, modeling, and adulthood," he said. His voice was calm, which made the silence around it even tighter. Madison gave a confused smile. Karen said, "Matthew, sit down." He didn't even glance at her. "Starting today," he continued, "you can finance all 3 yourself." The words landed in order, first on Madison, whose face emptied, then on Robert, who actually set his fork down, then on Karen, who went pale before she went furious. Chloe had stopped crying without realizing it. "What are you talking about?" Madison asked. Matt finally looked at Karen and Robert. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Karen said his name again, sharp this time, but no one moved. Karen, Robert, and Madison understood immediately that he meant the acting conservatory, the housing supplement, and the endless little rescue payments dressed up as family support. Madison's friend stared at the floor. Robert muttered, "Don't do this here." Matt kept his eyes on his sister. "I'm already doing it here." The whole room froze. When I first started dating Matt, his little sister Madison was 8 and already running the emotional climate of that house. The first time I saw it clearly was at a Friday dinner at Karen and Robert's place. Karen had made spaghetti, Robert had a game on mute, and Madison decided halfway through the meal that she wanted takeout sushi instead. Karen told her no once, softly, and Madison slid off her chair, cried hard enough to choke, and kicked the table leg until her milk tipped over. I waited for a consequence. Instead, Karen crouched beside her and said, Okay, don't get yourself worked up. While Robert reached for his wallet, Matt grabbed paper towels and cleaned the floor. 10 minutes later, Robert came back with a California roll and a smile, and Madison sat down like she had survived an injustice. She's our surprise baby, Karen told me, almost proudly. She feels things deeply. Matt didn't say anything. He just wrung out the dishcloth and kept wiping up milk no one else had touched. Madison looked at him and said, Can you get me soy sauce? Like he worked there. He got it, because that was easier than a fight he wouldn't win. That was my first lesson in how that family rewarded the loudest need. On the drive home that night, I asked Matt if Madison was always like that, and he gave a tired shrug that answered before he spoke. Pretty much, he said, eyes on the road. When I was a kid, there were rules. Chores before TV, summer jobs at 15. No help with college. My parents were stricter then, or maybe just more tired and poorer. We stopped at a light, and he tapped the wheel once. I asked if he resented her. Not when she was little, he said. It wasn't her fault she was born into the easy version. Then he glanced at me and added, But people get attached to being the exception. I remember the streetlight on his face, the way he said it without drama, like he had already accepted a fact he didn't approve of. He told me Madison never heard no for long, because somebody always translated it into yes if she cried, pouted, or simply waited people out. The problem, he said as we pulled into my apartment lot, is that eventually everyone starts calling it love. That should have warned me. Years went by, and the pattern didn't fade. It got organized. At birthdays, holidays, even random Sunday dinners, the whole house rearranged itself around whatever version of Madison had shown up that day. One Thanksgiving, she arrived 40 minutes late, announced she wasn't eating carbs, and asked why no one had made salmon. Karen immediately started reheating leftover chicken breast. Robert joked that artists were high maintenance, and somehow that counted as permission. Matt carved turkey, carried dishes, fixed the folding chair, and kept conversation moving whenever Madison got bored and turned sharp. If gifts were being opened, hers had to go first. If a story got attention, she interrupted with a better one. If anyone else was celebrated for too long, she found a reason to look wounded. The rest of the family didn't even see it as manipulation anymore. They called it managing her energy. Once, when Matt's cousin asked why Madison never helped clear the table, Karen laughed and said, We all contribute in different ways. Madison didn't look up from her phone. She just stretched out one hand so Matt could pass her the whipped cream. He did it automatically, then caught my eye and looked annoyed with himself. In that house, selfishness had become furniture. By her mid-teens, Madison had figured out exactly what the family most liked to worship about her. She was pretty, camera-ready, and completely in love with being looked at. Karen turned the guest room into a wardrobe corner with garment racks and a lit mirror. Robert paid for headshots, ring lights, workshop fees, and whatever subscription some acting coach said was essential. If Madison posted a self-tape, Karen sent it to relatives like a graduation announcement. If she booked a student short film for no money, Robert said, this is how big careers start. At one summer barbecue, Madison changed outfits 3 times before sunset because the backyard light was wrong for content. Chloe was 9 then, sitting on the patio steps with a popsicle, watching her aunt pose by the hydrangeas, while Karen held a reflector board she barely knew how to use. "Can you move the cooler out of frame?" Madison called, and Matt, who had been grilling for everyone, moved it. She thanked him without looking at him. Later that night, Karen told me Madison wasn't meant for ordinary work because she had presents. I asked who was paying for all this presents. Karen smiled like I'd made a small, uncultured joke. By then, support in that family was a one-way road with Matt's name on it. When Madison got into an acting conservatory in the city, the decision about who would help pay for it was treated as already made before we sat at our kitchen table. Karen brought the packet. Robert talked numbers like they were brainstorming, and Madison sat on our sofa saying she didn't want money to kill her dream. Chloe did homework nearby. Matt asked what loans looked like, whether Madison could work part-time, whether the program had cheaper housing. Karen answered each question like he was insulting talent. "She needs to focus," she said. Robert added, "You know how much she looks up to you." That was almost funny, considering they'd paid nothing toward Matt's education and had congratulated him for taking on debt at 18. He still said yes. Not all of it, but enough tuition support to make the program possible. Enough monthly help that his weekends disappeared into extra shifts and a bookkeeping job he hated. I told him clearly I was not using my salary for Madison's dream while we still had a daughter to raise and save for, and he said he understood. He never fought me on that. He just worked more. That was the first bill with our daughter's future hidden behind it. The hardest part was that Chloe adored Madison anyway. With only 5 years between them, Madison never felt like a traditional aunt. She felt like the glamorous older girl at the center of the room, the one who knew eyeliner tricks, took cute mirror selfies, and talked to Chloe like she was old enough to be interesting. When Chloe was 11, Madison took her for iced coffee, let her hold the phone while she filmed outfit videos, and called her my tiny bestie. Chloe came home glowing every time. She copied Madison's slang for a month after one mall trip. She started asking if she could wear her hair like Madison's and help backstage when Madison had student performances. I watched it happen and kept hoping some of it was real. Madison could be generous in short bursts, especially when attention came with it. She'd surprise Chloe with clearance makeup, tag her in stories, tell people, "She's obsessed with me," like it was adorable. Chloe heard affection. I heard ownership. But 14-year-old girls are built to reach toward people who look like who they might become, and Madison knew how to stand in that light. Chloe only saw glitter. A few months before the birthday dinner, Matt, Chloe, and I were at a bakery downtown after Chloe's dentist appointment. We were waiting for coffee when Madison walked in, saw a display cake covered in fresh strawberries and soft pink piping, and stopped long enough to say, "Okay, that is gorgeous. If anyone ever loved me properly, they'd get me something like that." Then she laughed, took a picture, and left because she got a call. Chloe watched her go, then quietly took one too and stood there staring at the cake like she had just been handed a clue. On the drive home, she said, "Did you hear what she said?" I did. I also heard the theatrical way Madison had said it, the kind of line she tossed out whenever an audience was available. Chloe didn't hear performance. She heard instructions. She kept the photo she'd taken of that bakery cake on her phone, asked me 2 weeks later how to make stabilized whipped frosting, and started sketching decoration ideas in the notebook where she usually wrote algebra reminders. By then, Madison was deeper into dieting, auditions, and mirror checking than ever, but Chloe didn't know any of that mattered more to her than a kind gesture. She only knew she wanted to make the exact cake her aunt had admired. She had no idea the target had moved. We left before anyone could call it an overreaction. Chloe cried the whole drive home, then got angry at herself for crying, which somehow made it worse. From the back seat, she kept saying, "I should have just bought her something normal." And then, "Maybe I made it too childish." And finally, "I can text her and apologize." Matt pulled into our driveway but didn't turn off the engine right away. He twisted in his seat and looked straight at her. "You are not apologizing for making a gift," he said. His voice was firmer than I'd heard all night. I added, "The problem was never the cake. The problem was adults humiliating a 14-year-old for being thoughtful." Chloe wiped her nose on the sleeve of the blue dress. "But what if she really hated it?" she asked. Matt answered before I could. "Then she says thank you and leaves it on the counter. That's what decent people do." She got quiet after that, which in Chloe usually means she is trying to rebuild a world in her head that just broke. We walked her inside, got her changed, made tea she barely touched, and sat with her until she fell asleep on top of the blanket. When we stepped into the hallway, Matt looked at me and said very evenly, "I'm done." I had heard Matt threaten to stop helping before, usually after some fresh insult from Karen or another manipulative call from Madison. He would cool down, feel guilty, and keep paying. That night was different because he didn't talk about consequences. He opened his laptop. We sat at the kitchen table in the light over the stove, the house finally quiet except for the refrigerator, and Chloe turning once in her room down the hall. Matt logged into the conservatory payment portal, the one he had set up years earlier when he started covering part of Madison's tuition, with the efficiency of someone who had visited it too many times. He clicked through saved cards, recurring payments, billing contact, housing supplement. There was no speech, no dramatic recap, no looking to me for permission. I just watched. "You're sure?" I asked once, because I needed to know whether I was witnessing anger or a decision. He nodded without looking up. "If I leave this in place after tonight," he said, "then I'm telling Chloe exactly what her place is." He removed his card. He canceled the automatic tuition draft. He deleted the backup payment for the housing supplement. Then he changed the billing email from his address to Madison's and hit confirm. A bland little page said the updates had been saved. A second later, the confirmation email landed in his inbox. Madison called 19 minutes later. Matt looked at the screen, put the call on speaker, and set the phone face up between us. "What did you do?" she demanded before he said hello. In the background, I could hear traffic and one of her friends asking what happened. Matt folded his arms. "I stopped paying your expenses." She gave a disbelieving laugh. "Because I didn't want cake?" "No," he said. "Because you humiliated Chloe for making one." Madison immediately shifted tone, going hurt and incredulous at the same time. "I did not humiliate her. I said I couldn't eat it. Mom handled it badly, sure, but you're punishing me over dessert. That's insane." Matt didn't move. "You didn't have to eat it. You did have to act like a decent adult to a 14-year-old who spent 3 days making you something." Madison said, "I'm your sister." He answered, "And you're 19. That shut her up for half a beat. Then she started talking faster about deadlines, housing, and how the tuition draft had been due that week, so this one reaction could derail everything she'd worked for. Matt let her finish. "You should have thought about adulthood before you treated my daughter like a joke in front of a room full of people," he said. "I'm done financing you." For once, he didn't soften a single edge. Karen called before Madison had time to invent a better story. Matt stepped into the living room, not to hide from me, but to keep his voice low near Chloe's room. Karen started in that clipped managerial tone she uses when she thinks confidence can restore order. "Put the card back on tonight," she said. "Madison's education is too important for impulsive punishment." Matt leaned against the mantel. "This isn't impulsive." She ignored that. "She is under pressure you don't understand. Young women in that industry have to be disciplined." "Disciplined," he repeated. "Chloe is 14. She spent 3 days making that cake. Madison mocked her, and you threw it in the trash." Karen snapped. "Because it was inappropriate." Matt's voice stayed level. "No, it was generous. What was inappropriate was a room full of adults acting like my child deserved to be publicly embarrassed because Madison had a preference. Robert broke in then, louder and less polished. You don't cut family off over one dinner. Matt answered him too. I'm cutting off the part where I sacrifice for people who can't show basic kindness to my daughter. There was a silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Karen said, stunned, You're really choosing this. Matt looked toward the hallway and said, I already did. Karen finally heard the word, no. After the calls were over, the house felt different in a way I didn't trust at first, like the quiet after a storm might still be a trick. Matt sat beside me at the kitchen table and rubbed his eyes. He looked tired, but not conflicted. That was new. For years I had watched him leave his family's house angry, only to spend the drive home explaining their intentions, reducing his own hurt, sanding down every sharp edge until he could keep functioning as their emergency fund and emotional translator. That night he didn't translate anything. He didn't say his mother meant well, or that Madison was immature, or that Robert was old school. He said what happened. He named it. He acted on it. I poured the cold tea down the sink, packed Chloe's blue dress into the laundry, and felt something in me settle all the way to the bottom. You chose us, I said quietly. Matt looked almost surprised by the sentence, then nodded once. I should have done it sooner. Maybe he should have, but I wasn't interested in punishing progress because it came late. I went to check on Chloe, tucked the blanket back over her shoulder, and stood in the doorway for a second. For the first time since I had joined that family, I felt completely calm. Three days later, Chloe came home from school with her backpack half open and a brightness I hadn't seen since the birthday dinner. You guys, she said before she even took off her shoes. It's okay now. She set a small shopping bag on the counter and pulled out a lip gloss set. Aunt Madison met me outside school after classes. She said she was sorry things got weird and that Grandma overreacted. We got smoothies, and she said she never wanted me to think she didn't love me. Matt and I exchanged the same look without speaking. Chloe kept going, talking fast because Hope does that. She was crying, Dad. She said the school was already warning her about late fees after the missed tuition draft, and she was under so much pressure. She said if you could just put the card back for now, everything could go back to normal, and we could all have dinner next week. There it was, tucked into the middle of the apology like a wire inside a toy. I asked, whose idea was it for her to talk to you about money? Chloe hesitated. She said I was the only one who could get through to Dad. Matt's jaw tightened. Chloe looked between us, confused again, still wanting the version of the story where kindness fixed things. The sentence wasn't hers. Matt didn't lecture Chloe. He picked up his phone, asked her to finish her snack, and called Madison right there at the kitchen counter. He put it on speaker before she could charm the tone of the room. Hey, Madison answered in a sugary voice the second she realized Chloe was nearby. Matt cut straight through it. Do not use my daughter to negotiate your tuition. Silence. Then Madison tried for wounded. I was apologizing. No, he said. You were recruiting. She started talking about how Chloe wanted peace, how family should help family, how she'd taken responsibility by reaching out. Matt stayed so calm that every excuse sounded thinner next to him. If your relationship with Chloe depends on tuition money, he said, then it isn't a relationship. It's leverage. Madison snapped back fast enough to reveal herself. That is so unfair. I'm trying to repair things, and you're making me the villain because you're cheap. I watched Chloe's face change at that word. Matt heard it too. You are an adult, he said. Handle your school with the same energy you bring to controlling a 14-year-old. Madison asked if he seriously expected her to throw away her future over one misunderstanding. No, he said. I expect you to stop treating my child like a payment method. Madison went quiet for half a second. Chloe took her phone to her room after that and texted Madison anyway, because 14-year-olds believe private conversations can rescue what adults break in public. 20 minutes later, she came back down in tears and handed me the phone without speaking. Madison hadn't bothered to be subtle once the money was out of reach. The messages were short and vicious. I never wanted this mess. Your dad ruined everything. I tried to be nice. You made it worse. Then the last one. If he won't help me, there's no point pretending we're still close. Chloe sat on the bottom stair and said, She said she never wants to see me again. Matt took a slow breath. That is not about you, he said. Chloe looked up at him, furious now. Then why did she say it to me? There was no good answer that would keep the truth small. I sat beside her and told her the one we had. Because some adults will hurt the person they think is easiest to reach. Chloe wiped her face hard, then pushed the lip gloss bag away with her foot. That ended the fantasy in a single afternoon. We sat at the kitchen table until dinner got cold, saying the kind of things parents wish children never had to learn, but learn anyway if they are going to stay safe. Matt told Chloe that love doesn't invoice people. I told her gifts are only gifts when they come without a bill hidden inside them. She asked whether Madison had ever liked her at all, and there was no clean answer. I think she liked being admired by you, I said, and sometimes she was genuinely kind. But the minute she wanted something more than she wanted to protect you, she showed us what mattered most. Chloe stared at the wood grain for a long time. Then she asked, So if I got her tuition back, she'd be nice again? Matt said, Probably. That's exactly why it wouldn't be real. Something about that landed. She nodded once, small but certain. She took the lip gloss set out of the bag, looked at it, and put it in the junk drawer with dead batteries and spare keys. I don't want it, she said. Later that evening, she muted Madison's texts, unfollowed her accounts, and handed me her phone so I could make sure there weren't any other messages waiting to sting. She didn't look lighter yet, but she looked clearer. Karen and Robert arrived the next afternoon without calling, which was typical of people who still believed urgency gave them permission. I saw Karen's SUV through the front window and knew before the knock why they were there. Matt opened the door but stayed in the frame. Karen started before anyone else could speak. This has gone far enough, she said. The school is charging penalties, and Madison could lose her place. Robert stood beside her with a folder. We can't cover this, he added. Not on this timeline. Matt didn't step aside. Then Madison needs a plan that doesn't involve me. Karen's eyes flashed past him, searching for Chloe. I moved up beside Matt. You don't get to say her name in this conversation after using her. Karen straightened. No one used her. Matt answered before I could. Madison did, and you were hoping it would work. Robert opened the folder and started pulling out statements and warnings. Matt never looked at them. I paid for years, he said. I'm done sacrificing for someone who humiliated my daughter and then tried to manipulate her for money. Karen said, You're abandoning family. Matt said, No, I'm protecting mine. 5 minutes later, they were back in the SUV and out of moves. 6 months later, our Saturdays look different. Chloe still bakes, but now the cakes stay in kitchens where people say thank you before anything else. She signed up for pastry class at the community center with money Matt used to spend on Madison's housing supplement, and he drives her there every week. He hasn't spoken to Karen or Robert since the day they stood on our porch and tried to turn tuition into a moral emergency. Through relatives, we heard they borrowed against the house to keep helping Madison, and even that wasn't enough. She had to get a job at a retail cosmetics store while staying in school, which, from where I stand, sounds like ordinary adulthood. Chloe doesn't idolize her anymore. That part is gone for good. But a few weeks ago, Madison sent one message through a cousin instead of through pressure. It was short, direct, and free of excuses. Madison said she was sorry for mocking the cake, sorry for using Chloe, and sorry for making love feel conditional. Chloe read it twice, set the phone down, and said, "Maybe later." I thought that was wise. In our house, later is allowed. So is distance. So is starting again carefully, if it ever becomes safe enough to matter. Now, it's just a kid baking for people who deserve the plate. What do you think? Did my husband do the right thing by cutting her off? Should he have done it much earlier? And was he right to let our daughter decide for herself whether she still wanted contact? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.